welcome to my 2020 quarter 3 wrap up. This is going to contain what I read in July, August, and September. I read half. I read 24 books overall. The first month in July, I read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I read 11 books. I spent a lot of the last little bit trying to read what I had. One semester ended, and another one started during this time. But without further ado, we should probably get started because it's a longer list. The first thing I finished was The Wife of Bath's Tale by Geoffrey Chaucer. It's one of the stories in the Canterbury Tales. I read this for my English course that I took over the summer. I mentioned about it in my last wrap up because I read the beginning, because I read the first half of the reading list. Well, it was fine. I don't know. I didn't give it a rating. It was fine. Very religious focused and femininity focused. And overall, it was fine. Just had to read it for class. Okay. I have a little bit of library books that I read via the online library. The first one being Say Her Name by Sarah Elliott. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. It's basically a collection of poetry and essays and all this stuff regarding women who died and suffered through police violence and hateful attacks, and focus on Black women who died, and I found it really, really impactful, and I 100% recommend it to be read by everyone. The next book I read was Beyond the Gender Binary by Alec Feldman. This I gave 4 out of 5 stars. It is a very short essay that he wrote about the gender binary and how it's kind of really flexible and things along those lines. I found it to be definitely very important, and I recommend that if you're unfamiliar with gender binary, that you should read it and really consider the stuff that he talks about. The next thing I read was for my class that I took over the summer, and that was the Tragical history. Oh shit. Let's add one more book to make it a little higher. So I just kind of felt it. Okay, we're stable now. Okay. Okay. Next thing I read for my online course is The Tragical History of Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe. I gave it 3.5 stars. It was a very interesting play that dealt with a lot of religious topics, and I found that to be very, very interesting. I wrote my essay on this for the class, and I just kind of found dealt with selling your soul and the consequence of knowledge and all that stuff. It was definitely a very interesting play to read, and although I do recommend watching it live, the one that Rip from Legends of Tomorrow is in, that's really good. Seeing plays live actually helps make it easier to understand in general, so that's more of a general thing I recommend doing. Okay, the next book I read was If We Were Villains by ML Rio. This was for the Dark Academics Book Club. I read it for it. It follows seven main characters who attend this very prestigious Shakespeare acting school, and it kind of just follows it. Shakespeare is a huge part of this book. Oh yeah, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Shakespeare is a huge part of this book. It goes back and forth to the main character, the protagonist, Oliver. He just got out of prison for murder of one of the people. And so it kind of just deals with what happened as well as what happened during it. It shows them doing a few Shakespeare plays, and like it kind of pulls from a lot of Shakespeare lines actually, and they use them very, very casually. And that was kind of like made the dialogue a little bit misunderstood, but you know, prestigious theater kids and murder. Okay, next one, Batgirl Volume 1, Beyond Burnside. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. I'm a huge Batman fan. I love the Bat family. She's part of it. I found this to be an okay start of her series. I don't know. I don't think this is how. It's complicated. I don't feel like this is like the best way to start it. Especially at that, I found the first volume of the Rebirth's Birds of Prey to be a much better introduction to Batgirl, and I felt like some of the things in those issues could have went really well as like a beginning issue for the beginning of a volume and this new run. So like it's hard. I still really enjoyed it. I really do like Barbara Gordon and how she kind of like, she's really coming to terms that she can't just go completely with how her photogenic memory, and how like that's not the only good thing that she has that she can use to her advantage in fighting. And I found that to be a very interesting conversation. Next up, we got the much loved Umbrella Academy Volume 3, Hotel Oblivion. I read this, I think as either like right after the second season was, the next season was released, or like right before, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It was enjoyable. I always enjoy seeing the characters kind of like develop and interact. By all means, the comics I don't find as memorable as the show for me, but I do feel like they're definitely very, very interesting, and it's definitely a lot of comic for what you usually get for a comic price. And I don't know, I just really love this dysfunctional family, and I really like how Vanya's developed. There's more development with Vanya in this story, and I think that's really important to her character. Okay, now we're on a library book. I returned it not that long ago, so I don't have it currently, and that is the Bloodwitch by Rin Chopaco. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I don't remember the particulars of it. I read a lot this little bit, but I just know I love a good witch story. It's really, really fun. I remember that, and maybe it's not a 5 star, but I don't remember anything. But yeah, I'm looking forward to reading more about from Ran Carpaccio in the future. I do own one of her books actually, so I should eventually get to that, but we'll see. The next book is the last book I read for my course I took over the summer, and that's Oroonoko by Afra Ben. This is a story about this man who falls in love with this girl, and his father doesn't approve. He's a prince, and he has him taken away and made to a slave along with her, and he ends up killing her and their unborn child, because he would rather them dead than the kid grow up in slavery. It's very much so a focus on slavery and racism and colonialism. It's an interesting story. I didn't rate it again. I don't know, I find that some of the school books we read are really hard to rate, because a lot of them is so different from what I would normally read that it makes it a little difficult. Anyways, next I read book 2 in the Witcher series, The Time of Contempt, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I adore the Witcher world with every fiber of my soul, and I just enjoyed seeing Ciri and Yennefer interact, and Geralt just trying to find them, and I just love this family dynamic they have going on currently in the books, and I'm looking forward to when it happens in the show. I definitely recommend these books if you are fans of the Witcher show, because they definitely have more in common with the TV show than the game. But yeah, continuously giving my love to the Witcher world. And finally, the last book I read during the month of July was Bloodwitch by Susan Dennard. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. This is the third book in the Witchland series, so I can't really talk about what's it about, but I just love seeing the characters' development. I like Merrick, what he's going through. I love Aedion, how he's going through stuff, and Isud's path and Sari's path. I just really enjoy how things are going, and I'm looking forward so much for the next one, which comes out at the beginning of next year, and I'm really looking forward to it. I don't know. I love me a good fantasy series. Now we're on with August, which is the one that I read the least amount during this quarter. The first, which I finally finished, The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, and I found it to be a lot. I definitely feel as though it could be shorter, and I found it to be just a lot. I don't really know. This is considered a dark academic book. It follows the main character Theo, and when he was 13, he was in this museum that something happened to it. Everyone who was in it except for him died, including his mother, and so it kind of goes from there, and he ends up stealing one of the paintings, the Goldfinch, and it kind of follows him through his life up to adulthood, and it's very much so an intense book. That's all I can think about it with this one. Okay. The rest of them are ebooks. Next I have is my Rot Riot by Rick Spears. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. This feels more like this girl who was a ballerina, and then she goes into becomes in a rock band, and it follows her as she goes cross country with 2 other girls, and then it kind of like goes through her life like that, and really talks about like struggles that she had, like eating disorders and stuff like that. And it was definitely very interesting. I have a review of it. I actually wrote a review for it on Goodreads and on NetGalley because it was an art that I got from NetGalley. So yeah, there's that. And then next book was Juliet Takes a Breath by Gabby Rivera. I give this 3.5 out of 5 stars. And this follows Juliet, who's a Puerto Rican girl, and she's a lesbian, and her current partner are keeping a secret because she's not out to her family, and then she ends up moving to be an intern for her feminist icon. And it really follows the story as Juliet learns really what feminism means and really grows comfortable within her identity. It's both being gay and being Puerto Rican and being a woman, and it's really a story about growth and stuff. I found it fun. It felt like it could be a little longer. I feel as though it could have been a little longer, but at the same time, I found it definitely had very important topics to talk about. Finally, the last book I read was Anne Frank, The Diary of a Young Girl, of course, by Anne Frank. I did not rank this because I felt it's kind of wrong putting a rating on a book such as this. It's based around this diary that Anne Frank wrote as she was hiding during World War II, during the Holocaust. And if you didn't know, everyone kind of knows what it's about. I found it to be very, very interesting. How, like, it really talks about how the conflict that built it up while they were stuck there, which is to be expected when you're enclosed in a small space with so many people and you're kind of stuck there. You're going to have some conflict within everyone. And I just found it very interesting how it was discussed in this book, as well as her own personal experience with it. And I found it very heartbreaking at the end when I talked about how it was added in how she died, like, not that long before the Allies took them down, the Germans down, and yeah, it was definitely a very emotional read. Okay, now we're into our September reads, which brings us into my next collection of books for my current semester of university, which is the fall semester, and I'm doing 3 English courses, so a lot of these books, and especially in the next quarterly wrap-up, will be for the course. But the first one is The Art of Love by Margaret Atwood. This I read for my Canadian prose class. I give this 3 out of 5 stars. It deals I marked it up a lot for my class. It's very, she categorizes it as speculative fiction, and it kind of follows 2 perspectives, Toby and Ran. Ran grows up in the God's Gardens, which is kind of like this cult-like place in it. It's kind of like where the Earth is currently going with global warming, and it deals with the pandemic, which is really close to home currently, and our world. But yeah, it's a very interesting story to read about. How am I gonna do this? Let's talk about Mexican Gothic by Sylvia Garcia. I have this 405 stars. I read this for the Dark Academics book club. It was very dark and very creepy. It follows our main character. Her name, I don't remember her name. I'm really bad at names. But her cousin, who's married, sends a mysterious letter home claiming that her husband's poisoning her. And so she goes to check on her cousin by her father's orders, and it kind of goes by there. It has like the house is a very big character in it, and it's very, very gross at times. But like, I found it to be very interesting. Felt like the end though could have been like a much larger portion, like not lengthwise, but like I felt like the ending needed more time to really have the effect that it had needed. But like, I was listening to it on audiobook, and there's times where I was kind of like covering my mouth, gasping. It was interesting, but to say the least. The next book I read was Bookish and the Beast by Ashley Poston. I give it 2 out of 5 stars. This is the 3rd book in the Geekerella universe. In the Geekerella universe, I give it 2 out of 5 stars. It really wasn't necessary. I don't feel like it was necessary. There wasn't really much of a plot. It was fine. Conflict happened too fast. It was resolved too fast. I don't really recommend it. The next book I read was a reread. That was Of the Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. I don't want to reread the entire series, just when I can finally get to the last book. This follows Blue Sergeant, who is the only non-psychic in a family full of psychics, and it follows her interactions towards these 4 Raven Boys: Canty, Adam, Ronan, and Noah. And it follows them on their journey trying to find this Walsh king. And now I'm just going to quickly run through the book stories that I read in the best ghost stories of JSE Fanu. This is from my supernatural fiction class. I read Carmilla, which was definitely my favorite out of all the ones we read. And it's a vampire story, has lesbianism. It's great. Love the gay vampire vibes. We have GreenTea, confused the hell out of me. Demented monkeys, don't really know. And then we have Schalken the Painter, necrophilia, still confused me a lot. And then we had the Familiar, which is stalking, also confused me a lot. So out of all of them, 3 out of 5, 3 or 4, didn't really understand. But I definitely recommend you read Carmilla. Carmilla is a really, really good story. And finally, the last book that I read during this quarter was Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. Don't have my rating in here, but I think I'd give it a 3 or 4 stars. Everyone knows what Alice in Wonderland is about. I read it for my children's lit course. I read it like in an hour or so. I found it to be a very, very interesting story. I found the illustrations to be adorable. But yeah, it was definitely a fun time. Definitely one of the books I'm excited to get to study during this course. And there is the wrap up for quarter 3. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.